Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and once again I'm joined by Kevin Graham for the Axon Bulletin. Plenty to talk about, Kevin. But let's go straight to our most recent fixture. What was your thoughts on the Livingston game there at the weekend? 3-2 win.
Good afternoon, Paul. It's great to be back here on a Monday. And first thing I want to say is the Celtic supporters from the Stirling area got a bit of bad news yesterday that one of a season ticket holders who goes up on the Paul McStay Stirling bus passed away yesterday. So Johnny MacLeod, also known as Chipsy, he went up on the Paul McStay bus, but he also came up on our bus because he stayed in Dunblane. Mm-hmm. So any midweek game, he would charge a lift back with us to get back up to Dunblane because public transport wasn't there. So it'll be a sad loss to the Dunblane and the Stirling community. So our thoughts are with all the members of the Paul McStay and his family and that.
100%. God bless Chipsy.
Aye. Once again, on Saturday, I don't think 3-2 was a reflection of how comfortable we were in the game. Mm-hmm. A bit like Wednesday night, we reacted well to going a goal down.
Yeah.
Which is something that we can't knock. It's something that we can't say is not a good trait to have in a team. But obviously, we didn't want to keep them going 1-0 down because there is going to be a time where that's not going to. We're not going to respond well.
Fairly early goals as well, which when they go in, Kevin, you think Celtic are still going to overcome this. The issue would be if it's one of these stuffy games like the game against Kelly.
Yes.
And if the team goes a goal up and you've only got 15-20 minutes to play, they're just going to have 11 men behind the ball. That's a difficulty.
Mm-hmm. We had a great reaction, and after Ryan Christie scored, I've begun to think there, because we had scored 2 quick goals, mm-hmm. See if Celtic Park was full, they 2 quick goals, the place would have been rocking and that game would have been finished by half time. We would have energised that team to finish that game, and I reckon if there would have been a full crowd there, that game would have been finished by half time. We'd have been 3-4-1 up by half time. Okay. And I reckon that we do miss the crowd.
I was going to ask you.
In situations like that. Even I go back to last season, early in the season when we went 1-0 down to Kilmarnock, mm-hmm. and that was the day that Rangers drew 2 each with St Johnstone just before we kicked off, and we went 1-0 down early doors to Kilmarnock, and the crowd backed the team that day. And by the time we got to half time, we were in front in that game, and I was thinking that on Saturday, mm-hmm. and I was going back to the previous season, that game against Kilmarnock, and also the game against Ross County, where we blitzed Ross County at the start of the second half. The early goal in the second half got the crowd lifted, and I can see that we're missing that at home. And maybe I'm sure Lennon says that he reckoned we missed it at the away tie as well.
Yeah,
the tempo just drops. I must admit on Saturday as well that I did feel that the tempo of the game had dropped, and Lennon was looking, the coaching staff and Lennon were looking to make changes to save legs, mm-hmm. because of the number of games that we've got coming up. And we got caught. It was a fair goal by the guy, and we had a dodgy 10 minutes. Was that a dodgy 10 minutes? We had a dodgy end to the game, but when you look at it, Lennon was going to bring on Mo and David Turnbull.
Yeah.
And he brought on... Who did he bring on as well? He was meant to make 3 subs at the same time. Kamala. He only brought on Kamala. I reckon that to give Lennon his due, the coaching staff their due there, I reckon they managed that 5-minute period after Livingston scored. They took a step back to go, right, let's get a grip of this game again. Mm-hmm. Let's settle it back down. They done that, then they made the subs, knowing full well that Celtic had got control of the game again. And I must admit, I was real impressed with Turnbull when he came on. He didn't do much, but it was his movement. Mm-hmm. He made himself available for the ball. He looked comfortable coming on in that situation where there was a bit of pressure on us, mm-hmm. and he looked comfortable when he came on. And you can actually see, you look at the midfield on Saturday as well, McGregor was fantastic. Cham was fantastic as well. The fact is, I think Turnbull can play in any one of their positions. Is maybe pushing them on, and they know
It's bound
Turnbull,
to, Kevin.
and they know Turnbull can do it.
Yeah.
And look, it's only a 10-minute cameo, but he showed enough in that 10-minute cameo. He showed enough intelligence and game management in that 10-minute cameo to say he knew what he was doing. He knew his instructions when he went on the park.
How do you then fit him into that midfield? Because I don't know if you would agree or disagree. That's the strongest part of your team. You're looking at players like, El Yunusi's fighting for a jersey. There's a lot of guys in there who are not first picks for the midfield areas. So how does Turnbull, because it's a cameo, as you say, and it was great to see him coming on at Celtic Park. It was brilliant. But how does he force his way in? Is there an area of that pitch that you think he can make his own?
I'm not really 100% sure at this precise moment in time, but where I see him pushing is McGregor, Cham, and also Ryan Christie will know that they've got a player sitting on that bench who can take their position. We don't really know that about Sorrow yet because we haven't seen him that many times. But when Turnbull came on and they know what Turnbull's done in the domestic game already, they know that there's a player there ready to come in. There's not, yes, there's some development with him, but the midfielders know that Turnbull's there. I mean, there was a bit of wailing and gnashing of teeth.
Oh, that's a good note of you. Quote there.
No. About the squad rotation.
There was a bit, yeah.
So let's have a look at this. There's no winter break. The season is shortened as well. And as we keep on saying, we're playing in 5 competitions.
Yeah.
So there is going to be squad rotation. There's got to be squad rotation because the players are not going to be able to go up to playing 4 games every fortnight. So there is going to be chances where we're going to need to see Turnbull coming in. And Brown, Lennon's already says about Brown that there's going to be games he's going to ask him to sit out because he can't play the number of games that we've got coming up. So Turnbull is going to get his chance, definitely. What I think we might need to get used to is the fact is we won't play the same 11 twice. We might have bitty performances, but then I reckon everybody's going to have that because of the number. I mean, we've got a big week this week. We're saying 5 competitions. We're playing Riga this week in a one-off game. Anything can happen in a one-off game.
Absolutely.
But what we're looking to do, we're looking to beat Riga, then the following week get through the playoff round. Then if we get into the Europa League group stages, we are Sunday, Thursday from now to Christmas. And we've got a League Cup to fit in, we've got a Scottish Cup to fit in.
Yeah.
So
last season's Scottish Cup.
all of us that are sitting here all wanting fantastic performances and consistency of selection, we might not get it just because of the number of games that we've actually got.
It'd be impossible, Kevin. It really would. And I know that was a feature of some of the comments after the game about tinkering with the team group. But, you do have in your own mind what the strongest 11 is. But as a squad, the players are used to playing a number of different shapes and a number of different formations. And I just think the quality of the personnel is what's going to allow us to do that as well. Bitty performances, I take your point there against Livingston. I think the scoreline flattered them. It really did. I mean, the penalty decision against Dyer I felt was a bit harsh. People disagreed with that on the day when I said that to Lawrence on the match day coverage. And the second goal for Livingston was just a cracker. I mean, you can't argue with that. It was just a brilliant goal. And sometimes that's what happens. Somebody strikes something from 25 yards, it's only going to stop when it hits the back of the net. And that's what the boy done. As you say, Celtic were on the ropes a wee bit after that for 5-10 minutes, but we weathered the storm. And, a 3-2 win at Livingston on paper doesn't appear to be a great result. But the big thing you can take from that is that, Celtic were sitting top of the league. And then the pressure was on the 2 nearest challengers, not just Rangers, the 2 nearest challengers. And I say that because all season I've been saying, I really do think, straight off the bat, I said, Motherwell are going to fall away. I did predict that Motherwell are going to fall away this season. I think they've done particularly well. Over the piece, they've been a strong side. I think Robinson's a very good manager, but he's hit that ceiling that Tommy Wright hit at St Johnstone probably 18 months before he left. I don't think he's going to get any better there. Aberdeen, that happened to them some time ago. I predicted that Hibs would be the team that's going to be the third force, if you'd like to call them that, this season. Partly down to the tremendous buys. I think they've bought really, really well. And also down to the management team. So going into that game, I says to Lawrence, I wasn't confident that Hibs were going to beat Rangers, but I thought they would take something from the game, and I was delighted that they did. But, Celtic have weathered that storm, because all we heard was that we're going to be 11 points behind Rangers. No, this carry on. That was the narrative. It's just not happened, is it? So, yeah, you're looking at the two results, 2-1 against St Mirren, 3-2 against Livingston. They don't seem that inspiring. You then go online, social media, but we've not played anybody yet. That's what I've been hearing. Well, we've actually put together a good run of results now. And I think that Neil Lennon is very good at doing that. I'm still, of the opinion that we messed up against Ferencvaros. I'm going to ask you a few questions about the Dermot Desmond comments that have been made in his rare interview as well, because, without being too critical of the interview, I think there was a big wider kind of story to be told there if you sit down for an hour with Dermot Desmond, but we'll get into all that. So I think, generally speaking, I'm just happy we got the points. I would love better performances. Do the fans being absent make a big difference to Celtic? I'm sure it does. I'm sure it makes a big difference to a lot of teams. I think, clubs come to Celtic Park and that's used for them as well, to their advantage. By the same token, the fans can get on Celtic's back if things aren't going our way in 50. You know that yourself, within the first 15 minutes. So it goes both ways, Kevin, and I think Celtic have done remarkably well also to weather the storm of the ball and goalie saga, and we'll be talking about left-sided players, which is why we're running with the James McClean link, because it is only a link to Celtic over the last few days. I've seen the pros and cons of any such move, and we'll be talking about that. But I think when you're looking at Livingston, you mentioned Ryan Christie. How did you think Christie performed?
I says, if I can just step back one little bit there. 2-1 against St Mirren, 3-2 against Livingston. If both the games end up 3-1, if we hadn't missed a penalty against St Mirren and they hadn't scored the wonder goal, we would be sitting here with a completely different view.
No, you're right. You're right.
And that just shows you how thin a line that there is in football. I mean, I thought Ryan Christie was superb in that sort of role where he struggled before. But then you look at that Celtic team, I'd actually written down that obviously Callum McGregor got man of the match, and deservedly so. And Michael Stewart called Callum McGregor getting man of the match because Gordon Strachan was picking it on Celtic TV, because Gordon Strachan loves Callum McGregor. Don't we all?
I think I told you the story about speaking to Gordon Strachan about a very young McGregor, where they were maybe getting a couple of the youth kids to join in with the first team. Because my point of reference with Strachan is never McGregor, but obviously he was at the club as a very young player, and he got him involved in the first team training. And the conversation between Gordon Strachan and Paddy McCourt was who actually showed up well. And Paddy, probably because of his own style of play, Paddy mentioned Islam Feruz, remember, and Strachan was like, sorry, McGregor was always light years ahead of that boy. And he actually did say that Celtic although at the time it didn't feel like that, Celtic done a brilliant bit of business in getting what they got for Feruz. It didn't seem like that at the time, did it? With hindsight, you think, aye, we probably did. But, Strachan was speaking so highly of McGregor as a very, very young kid. I think the player that he's developed into is the most important player in our squad. Definitely,
he's a coach's dream. I mean, we know we don't like to see him at left back, but for those that look at the stats, I mean, Alan Morrison for Celtic with Numbers done an article which shows that he wasn't actually that bad at left back. He wasn't poor as a left back. He done a job as a left back, but you want to see him in the middle of the park. The game on Saturday, the block at the edge of the box, when there was a shot in the edge of the box in the first half, and he done the defensive side of the game. the goal that he scored, it was just a good midfield performance. Christie had a great performance, so did McGregor. Cham, I mean, you look at Cham, Christie and Ayeti for the third goal. I mean, that was a fantastic move. And Ayeti's finish was something else. The majority of the strikers would actually have tried to go round the goalkeeper at that point, not hit it first time with a bit of bend on it. Fantastic. Really, really good.
And the shape of it as well, Kevin, when he strikes that ball, you would expect him to go on the other side of the player, but he's gone the tight angle. He's used the tight angle, and what an execution.
He doesn't waste much, eh? He hasn't wasted much so far. Every shot that he has is on target. He's been really, really impressive. I was really impressed with his tight hold-up play as well. Celtic need players that are able to do stuff in tight situations, because we're coming up against these blanketed defences all the time now. So you need players that have got that little bit of cunning, a good first touch to get themselves out of a tight situation, to commit their markers. Frimpong's got it, and Ayeti's now got it as well. And you see him when he's back to the game. It's something that Edouard hasn't got. It's something that Kamala doesn't seem to have. But he can fire the ball into Ayeti and he can hold on to it. He can use his body shape, and he's got great close control. And he's also a fantastic finisher. So he's a natural finisher.
Here's one for you then, Kevin. I can understand people making comparisons when he first came in with Gary Hooper. And what I mean by that is the 12-yard area of the pitch, the box, right? The finishing, the instinct. But I don't think he's the same style of player as Gary Hooper.
No.
I really don't. Now, there's never been a better player at holding up the ball. I say there's never been. We've had a few cracking players, like Dembele was great at that, as was Samaras. But I'm thinking further back, to Viduka, and I've seen a couple of mentions of Viduka over the weekend. Now, I'm not comparing him to Ayeti, but see when that boy had the ball, where he's back to goal, he could hold it up. The body strength was unbelievable.
That's a good comparison.
He was brilliant at it.
That's a really, really good comparison. When you have a look at the first goal on Saturday as well, the ball's fired into Ayeti and he lays it off to McGregor. He's got the football awareness. And there was a couple of times as well, the ball comes into him and he's got that wee lightness of feet that Viduka had. And he can turn, he can hold the man off, and he's got a good awareness of what's going on round about him. And the fitter that he gets, the more that comes into the game that you can actually see. Maybe the Gary Hooper comparison was when he wasn't fit and he was just hanging around the box doing what he can do. But now he's getting fit, he's fitter, he's growing in confidence, he's more in tune with his teammates. You're actually seeing what's in his box, what's in his wee box of tricks.
His box of tricks, absolutely.
He looks a fantastic signing so far.
He looks like a bargain. I know when we signed him, and we were talking constantly about this long line of strikers that Celtic have purchased within the same bracket, the Klamala bracket, and in the hope that one of them will pay dividends. The only time we've really pushed the boat out in terms of the actual structure of a deal, obviously, was to bring Edouard in. And I remember saying to Paddy McCourt again, just to name drop twice in the first 10 minutes of this broadcast, he says, Edouard was worth that £9 million from day one, because if you sold him, you get your money back straight away. By the time it comes to that point, which is inevitable, you're hoping to get about 4 times that amount. But when you're looking at that as a potential partnership, Kevin, and I hope we do see it as a partnership, because the last time we got a sniff at an amazing partnership up front, it was Dembele and Edouard, and it didn't last long, did it really? We only seen a couple of games where they linked up. I think the Edouard and Ayeti partnership is something to savour. I mean, when you're looking at the fact that Edouard was benched, are you quite happy he was just being rested?
Yes, you've got to take Neil at face value that he's had, and the facts are there. He was out for the 2 games before the international break. He played 2 games for France under 21s. He's came back and played 2 games for us in a short space of time. And when he went off at New St Mirren Park on the Wednesday night, he was limping. He did look a bit heavy-legged at that point. So if he can have that sort of frank and honest conversation with a manager, then I think that bodes really well for the relationship.
Oh, definitely.
There's no There's no, I didn't want to play. There is we need to have a talk about, you need to manage players. And we've got to manage players, as we were talking earlier on. In this squad rotation, we've got to manage players. And there's going to be games where we're going, why are you dropping him? He was fantastic. Well, it's because the sports science could be saying he's in the red. It could be his performance is dropping, because we're now getting into a period, hopefully getting into a period where we're going to be playing every three days. And if that's the case, there's not going to be much time for coaching. It's going to be recovery time. And you're going to need guys with decent mentalities that know the way that we're playing. And that could mean that we stick to a 3-5-2 formation. It doesn't matter who we play, but at times it won't look as balanced as what we would like it to be. I think the games against St Mirren and Livingston, the 3-5-2s look more balanced. Against Ross County, and I got a bit of abuse for this, but against Ross County, we shipped an awful lot of chances against Ross County. Against St Mirren and Livingston, we haven't shipped those amount of chances.
No, you're right.
And I think that's really been down to the balance of the team. And I think that's been down to Frimpong and also Greg Taylor being a natural left-hand-sided player. On the left-hand side, with Cal McGregor on the left as well, further out the left as well.
It's a nice link into the headline, which is around James McClean being linked to Celtic, Kevin. So we'll move on to that in just a second. But before I do that, I'm going to ask you a question then about, obviously, you said you're getting a wee bit of flack about some comments you made. That happens. I think Taylor gets a bit of flack. He certainly gets a bit of flack when you're watching the kind of analysis and the reaction to games on social media, which is a good gauge. It sometimes can be a difficult watch, but it is a good gauge to see how fans are reacting to certain players' performances. And Taylor does get a hard time. When you look at the actual impact, and what I'm talking about, Alan Morrison does do the stats and does them very well. When you actually look at the impact, and of course Taylor set up another goal at the weekend, I think what Frimpong does is memorable. The jinking play, taking on men, exciting, getting you on the edge of the seat, it's memorable. But over the 90 minutes, if you look at what Taylor does, the amount of ball that he has, probably more than anyone else other than Callum McGregor on the park for Celtic, I think his performances are being a wee bit undervalued at times.
The wide players for Celtic are under tremendous scrutiny the way that we play. We have to go wide to try and stretch the games because teams pack out the middle. And so when they make a bad pass, bad cross, it's highlighted. It's a bit like when a goalkeeper makes a mistake as well. It can be easily highlighted because the way that we play is utilised down the wings quite a bit. And I must admit, Greg Taylor, sometimes he does frustrate. Sometimes you just knock it and see if you can get past the man. Sometimes he takes that wee touch and he slows the game down and his passing's not great. But he's workmanlike going up and down that line. Is that what we need? Could we get better? Maybe. But we would probably need to pay quite a hell of a lot of money to get somebody better to do that. And I'm not saying that there's not better out there. But for me, he adds balance because he's naturally left-hand sided. And at the moment, maybe we need to actually have a look at that until we've got a better option, or Taylor grows into the role of an attacking wing-back. Then we have to say that he is the first choice out there. And I know Forrest had a good game against Ross County at left wing-back, but you don't want James Forrest playing left wing-back. There is going to be games where Forrest playing left wing-back is not going to work. It's not going to be good. And Taylor gives you that natural left-hand side. Could he be better? Yes, of course he could.
But then he might get better. This is the thing as well. He is, like I say, I'm saying adapting. Some people might say he should have already adapted. I think he's definitely adapting to a style of play that probably isn't his natural style of play. Having played in a very defensive setup at Kilmarnock, he's now at an ultra-attacking side with Celtic.
He seems frustrated with himself as well.
He does. You can see it in his body language.
He seems very frustrated. He seems like he's trying too hard.
Sometimes, definitely.
And maybe that's up to the management team just to give him a bit of confidence and say, just relax. They play your own game. We've got trust in you playing this position.
Yeah, well,
and
he should know as well.
He should know that, but maybe
the personnel,
maybe he just needs that wee arm round him and going, look, just relax a bit.
We all need that from time to time,
Definitely,
Kevin. Obviously, we shipped out Johnny Hayes and we shipped out Bolingoli after his indiscretion, even though I was preparing Celtic fans for seeing him back in a Celtic jersey. I don't think it's going to happen. And we will be talking at some point about James McClean. We'll have a look at the comments coming in via Twitter, Facebook and YouTube. But I did find it interesting that, there was a table of the last 10 seasons, including this season, of the first 7 games and how we've performed. And we're doing okay. We're on 19 points, which is the maximum over the piece, over the 10 seasons. So in terms of some of the bad starts that we've had over the last 9 seasons, I think it's been a good start, even with the challenges of the coronavirus and everything that's happened with that as well, Kevin. So, that was an interesting league table to see that we're 19 points up, which is the best. I think the worst one was a couple of seasons back under Rodgers.
Under Rodgers. I think the performances and the results are falling neatly into 2 narratives. The first narrative is that we're absolute dog meat and we should be beating teams 6-7-0 every time that we go out. Another narrative is if you have a look at that league table, we're doing really well. We're probably at a point where we would want to be at this precise moment in time.
Just for our listeners in Costa Rica, can you confirm what dog meat means, Kevin?
It means dog's food. It means we're a mess. We're poor.
Yes.
I forgot that we're a worldwide audience. So there's 2 narratives there, and we seem to be falling into nicely into both camps. We've got the happy clapper camp who have got, look at this league table. We're doing really well, especially with all the challenges. We've got another camp that are like, we're terrible, we're giving up too many chances, where the truth is somewhere in the middle. Mm-hmm. And everything that we're bringing up that we should be, when we're completely dominating games, we need to finish teams off. And that should have happened against St Mirren, and it should have happened against Livingston, and it didn't. We're having this conversation, and I'm sure the coaching staff are having the exact same conversation. I'm sure the players are having the exact same conversation. I'm sure Callum McGregor says it after the game. He says we need to defend better as a team. We're giving away too many goals. We need to score more goals when we're on top. But at this point of the season, and at any point in the season, really, it's 3 points. Mm-hmm. I'm maybe preparing myself for us not being as fluid as what we like because of the number of games that we're going to play. And the way the management team seem to be setting up the team is there's going to be changes every single game that we play. And whether we like it or not, they've got the players' welfare and the good of the team in mind. Mm-hmm. And we are going to, for me, we are maybe going to see changes every week, and we might not be able to second guess what's going to happen from game to game because we don't know the ins and outs. We don't know what reports are getting put on the coaching staff's desk. Who's carrying injury? Who's not recovering better? Who's maybe a bit leggy? And we've got internationals in that as well. So this is going to be
huge amount of players involved in internationals as well, Kevin. You know.
I would want to get to a point in games, Paul, as well, where it's 60 minutes, if we're 4-0 up, make 5 subs. Mm-hmm. Because we are going to need to use these 5 subs going forward. If we want to be in every competition and want to go to win every competition, we've got to give players game time.
No, you're right. I totally agree with that. And this is me responding also to a comment that was made on the YouTube video on Saturday saying, stop talking about Roderick and Griffiths. You're living in the past. Not at all, because these guys are current Celtic squad players who, in my opinion, would be better than a couple of youth players at this moment in time if they're fit, which obviously Roderick now is, because that's why he's sitting on the bench, and hopefully Griffiths will be fit and he will also be sitting on the bench. So that was my point entirely. You've got to be able to utilise the subs and rotate the squad. There's a couple of good points coming in, which we'll go through just now. Kev, now, Red Scotland raises a point that we'll certainly be covering at some point during the bulletin. I think the time is right to sell Ayer and immediately reinvest in Colley of Sampdoria and a proper left back. Throw McClean into that mix and we're set for the season. So Red Scotland's all about bringing McClean in. Free speech for the dumb via YouTube. Is McClean better than we already have? Good question. And Stephen Forbes, great to start the week with another Axon Bulletin. Welcome to the show, Stephen. As mentioned by myself and Lawrence during Saturday's post-match, it's important not to get drawn into the mainstream media's narrative and agenda. And I think, you know, when you're looking at social media, as you say, there is often two camps. And it is important that you don't get dragged into the third camp, which is the mainstream narrative. But the two camps of Celtic fans, you know, everything's great, everything's bad. I don't think it's ever as simple as that, is it? I mean, there's good and bad. You're looking at the fact that we're sitting 19 points in, which is the best performance of any of the 10 seasons, including the 9 in a row. It could be better. It actually could be better. The performances could be better. But Neil Lennon knows that, and I think they are operating under difficult circumstances.
I think sometimes as well, as football fans, we have the tendency to worry about things that never happened. For what I'm kind of meaning about that is like, aye, but they could have scored in the last minute, like Livingston on Saturday. Well, they didn't. Mm-hmm. It didn't happen. Aye, we could go and play Hibs next week. If we play like that, then we're going to get beat. Well, we haven't played Hibs yet. That's a completely different 90 minutes. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, especially myself, my mind works like that at times, but then sometimes I need to step back and go, wait a minute, have a look at what's just happened. Right, that didn't happen. So if we're having those worries, the players and the coaching staff are also having those worries as well.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes we get bogged down in what might have happened.
No, you're right.
What actually has happened.
Had that boy scored the header,
aye,
you know, with 15 seconds to go. I know. You're right. We didn't, and we got the 3 points, and you know everybody's happy with that.
When you look at the game against St Mirren, Eddie missed the penalty. St Mirren had a wee 5 minutes after it. Then the game completely died a death. Mm-hmm. We weren't under any pressure whatsoever in the last 10 minutes.
No.
3-1 up, that happens, as I've said previously. If that happens at 3-1 up, you go, that's great, man. That's great game management.
There's also the thing you're saying, worrying about scenarios that don't exist, they could have done, etc., etc. But the whole tempo of the game changes if the opposition score a goal. You know, right. Celtic then step up a gear. There's always the opportunity to change with that as well. Maybe no with 15 seconds to go.
Who's not to say with the crowd there on Saturday when Livingston score, the crowd get behind the team again, we go through the gears, steady managing the game out, we actually go up it again, we score again.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right.
Could just be, there's a lack of emotion with no fans there. And I reckon against Copenhagen last year, we got put out because the emotion of the crowd pushed the team forward when we should have just been looking to take it into extra time. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it works for you, sometimes it works against you. But I think that emotion is making a lot of the games seem very sterile and they become almost chess matches now. That's just...
Well, he's playing a good game of chess at the minute, Kevin. IH Decorating, welcome to the show via YouTube. If James McClean wasn't a notable Celtic fan, nobody would want him signed. He's never impressed me, and surely there are better options out there. So that's an interesting point, and we'll have a look through some of the others. Gary Doonan, welcome back to the show, Gary, via Facebook. Certain Celtic fans need to keep the head. The abuse the manager is getting in some quarters is terrible. Have a proper look at the stats so far compared to previous seasons, and I think that's what we're referring to, you know, the basic stats in terms of where you are points wise. You know, we've only dropped points against Kilmarnock.
Of course, and this is a kind of point I'm maybe trying to make, is we will come to a point where we need to bury teams when we're on top. Mm-hmm. And that's where, if there's been any disappointment in the St Mirren and the Livingston games, that's been the disappointment. That we haven't hammered home that advantage, and we've been sweating because we've only got a goal lead towards the end of the game. Red Scotland's point's an interesting point as well about selling Aya and bringing in a left back, McClean, and a centre half with that money, and that may happen. That's a decision that might have to be made.
Let's talk about Aya then, because it is something that I was hoping to discuss. Before I do so, free speech for the dumb. Agrees with you. Having no crowd is a great leveler for the smaller teams. I think that it can work both ways as well, because it can switch on the smaller teams. A lot of them up their game against Celtic, not just because of the opposition, but because of the atmosphere and the fans behind them as well, or against them.
How many times do you hear opposition players coming to Celtic Park and going, we can keep it tight for 20 minutes, we silence the crowd, and it helps them. We scored 2 quick goals on Saturday. That place, the roof lifts off that place. The Livingston's players then, their mindset changes because they're in a cauldron, they're in a noise. The emotion is there. And even though I think it's now been proved that home advantage, even with no fans being there, is still there. The home advantage is there. A home crowd can fire on, can hammer teams. They can make that advantage more greater than what it is at this precise moment in time. For me, it's a definite. I didn't think it was going to make a part, but Saturday was the first game that I watched where I was thinking to myself, by the way, if we had a crowd in there, this game was finished by half time.
Yeah, I mean, the Celtic Park crowd is world renowned for that, Kevin. So, interesting point. Chris Aya to AC Milan. We've seen figures ranging from 15 to 27 million, depending on where you read the story. There definitely seems to be an interest. The AC Milan are interested in Chris Aya. When you look at his performances this season, have you been impressed with Aya?
I'm almost impressed with Aya. I know that he's got faults, and I know defender. People say he goes to ground. Did he go to ground too early on Saturday for the penalty because he was caught out of position? Was there a bit of desperation when he threw his cell trying to block the cross coming in? That's true, but look at the game against St Mirren, the way that he drove forward, and St Mirren were sitting that far deep. They were allowing Aya to drift 40, 50 yards with the ball. And when he got to 30 yards from St Mirren's goal, they were going, who's going to pick him up? Because he's an extra body in there, and he's got the ability to do that. I think he could improve a season alongside Duffy. Duffy seems to be a good communicator and a good leader at the back there, and he'll put his head in where Aya maybe has to learn that. But Lawrence and yourself made a very good point. He's been playing professional football since he's been 15 years old. He's had 7 years playing professional football at a decent level. And clubs will be looking at that going, if he goes to a better league, he'll develop again. And for fans who maybe say, I don't see a £15 million player in there. Well, there's maybe not a £15 million player in there just now, but what your AC Milans or maybe some of your English clubs are saying, there's a £50 million player in there. When they look at his progress over the last 7 years, they're not buying a £15 million player. They're buying a potential £50 million player. And that's what they're seeing. And these clubs, your English clubs, your Italian clubs, £15 million is a drop in the ocean to them. So they're looking at what he's done over the last 7 years, and they'll be flagging up the things that we've flagged up. Sometimes his concentration goes, but sometimes players need to make that step up, and going to AC Milan will be a step up to playing with Celtic, training with Celtic day in, day out, and the player will need to up that level, the same that he's upped that level since he's been 15. So that's what they're looking at. They're not just looking at the here and now, they're looking at the potential of the player.
Do you think that's the most real challenge that Celtic will face between now and the transfer window slamming shut, in terms of Aya to potentially AC Milan, and Cham, potentially Southampton? He's also been linked to Porto and Lyon. And of course, Edouard, who is simply rested at the weekend, but then the speculation mill starts going into overdrive. Is that going to be our biggest challenge? I mean, it's great to be talking about certain players we might want to bring in. We're going to get onto the Dermot Desmond interview in a few moments, Kevin, but are they the bean counters at Celtic looking to cash in on one of the players I've mentioned?
It's a strange transfer market, and you look at Liverpool last week. They sold one of their highest rated youngsters to Wolves as part of the deal to bring in Jota for them. And a lot of the Liverpool fans it was a wailing and national. Well, I'm going to say wailing and national grief there. Again, they were moaning that this young prospect had left. But the way that the market is, you could be losing some players that you want to keep because of the finances of every club.
Mm-hmm.
There's guys on the fringes of your team where before you would be looking to get money for them. Clubs are not going to be interested in them anymore at the value that you had on them. So it could be that we're going to need to lose a player that you would rather keep. Then we get to the situation that, well, who would be best? Who would be the least worst to lose? So Eddie would be
the best worst case scenario.
The best worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And you would probably say that Ayer's the best worst case scenario.
I think when I look at the positions, I look at the positions in the cover, and even if it was a last minute thing, you know, and the player left, where we're best covered is the middle of the park. I would hate to lose Edouard and not have anybody in to replace him and run with the three strikers we've got at the club. I would hate to lose Ayer and just run with the defence that we've currently got. Even if we bring in a left-sided defender, you know, I just think at centre half, you're then looking for the rest of the season to rely on maybe Beaton a wee bit more at centre half. I'm not criticising him, by the way, but you know, I just don't think that he's at the same standard as Ayer as a centre half, or Duffy or Julian, who are the three first picks. You've then got El Hamid. If we lose Ayer out of that selection of players, I just think, you know, that would be a bad... I'd be concerned if we lost Ayer or Edouard. If we lose one of the midfield players, although I don't want to, and the two guys that maybe are in the frame is Encham and Christie, then I think we can, with the squad we've got, I think we can handle that.
Possibly, but I was talking earlier on about players that can do stuff in tight areas, and Cham's one of those players.
Oh, I love Cham.
You saw that on Saturday again. What I'm maybe meaning by Ayer is he needs to leave to improve. He's maybe reached the ceiling at Scottish football, and he's going to keep on making the same mistakes at domestic level unless he goes to a better league. El Hamid had a good game on Saturday, and El Hamid's proved for the Israeli national team that he can play on the left-hand side of a free. Beaton can play as a sweeper there. I do think, though, I do agree, if we lose Ayer, that we will sign another centre-half. I do think there's a contingency already there. There'll be a contingency there if we get offered stupid money for Edouard. But I don't think there's any need for a contingency. I'm agreeing with you here. There's no need for a contingency if you lose Christie or Cham, because we have got those numbers in the middle. But the club will be looking at it going, the best worst case scenario with the money that we're going to get is possibly Cham, but we'd maybe get more money for Ayer. And that would be, and it is, the fact is this transfer window doesn't shut until the 5th of October. Must be a pain for the management team and the accountants at Celtic.
See, when you're looking at the player that Ayer is at this moment in time, like you say, and it may require a move for him to iron out the deficiencies. As you say, it might require different coaching at a different club, playing in a different league. I get what you mean there, because I think Van Dijk was at that stage. Van Dijk needed that move. He wasn't perfect. He is one of the best players I've ever seen at Celtic, but you could see that there were areas of his game that he could still develop in, but he had to move to develop that, and he did that successfully. He then develops at Southampton before moving to Liverpool. So I understand your point fully, and I would agree with it as well. I think it's a good point. We're talking about the management of the club and the decision makers, and it would be remiss of us not to discuss some of the comments made by Dermot Desmond. Lawrence and I spoke about some of the things that he said in an interview, an exclusive interview with The Athletic, which is a publication that I don't subscribe to I don't know if you do. I think you maybe did at one point.
did at one point.
I don't subscribe to it, but fair dues for getting an interview like that. That's a cracking interview, a real coup to get Dermot Desmond. We don't get anybody from the club, anyone, despite our requests. We don't get anybody from the club on a Celtic state of mind. So,
But if Dermot Desmond wants to come in,
well,
if he's listening to this, watching this,
it's a difficult one, because I've been thinking, looking at some of the criticisms over the type interview that was. I've looked at some of the criticisms of that interview, and the guys at the Athletic and girls, I've got my sympathy a wee bit, because when you get somebody of that stature, then there's sometimes certain conditions within the angles that you can take it at. You know, it's not like pot shots at a press conference, where we've seen it in the past where grenades are getting thrown in. People then look at journalistic integrity and all this kind of thing. And yeah, there's certain areas of that interview I would have loved to have been explored more. But I'm not criticising them, because I've been in that similar position previously, where you want to ask certain things, but you're kind of approaching that with one arm tied behind your back. And I think that the interview suffered a wee bit from that, but it's not a criticism of the person I think it was great that they got the interview.
Can he Paxman everybody? Or
You really can't. You can't. And you also can't please everybody, because some people want you to Paxman them, as you just described there, and get stuck writing about them. And a lot of the time the interview isn't pitched for that. And the reason you've got the interview is based on certain things, certain conditions. For example, if we were to get Peter Lawwell, and I know that somebody did get an interview with Peter Lawwell fairly recently, within the Celtic fraternity over the last couple of years, didn't they? You're not going to get much from that interview. You really aren't, because if you start pushing on certain subjects, then, you know, the very reason that you got the interview is null and voided there and then, isn't it? So well done to them for getting it. It's a chargeable kind of subscriber service, I believe, but I've picked up quite a lot of it from the Celtic sites who make a kind of career out of taking interviews and then regurgitating them, so fair play to them. But some of the points, you know, confirmed really about Brendan Rodgers in relation to the move to China, and confirmed a lot about his kind of motivation for money and brand Brendan rather than the good of Celtic. So confirming a lot of what we already knew, and the fact that he tried to sound out Dembele and on a move to China as well.
Or confirming that they already put out their narrative that he wants to keep out there. There's there could be another angle that I understand what you're saying about it, but was it just a puff piece?
Well,
he said, I just want to back up certain myths that are already out there.
Potentially.
And Brendan has an opportunity to speak to the press every week, and his version of events is out there. So let's put this other version of events is out there, which has already been leaked via certain sources. So let's just knuckle down on it, double down on it, and just go, it's coming for me now.
Well,
so this is our version of events.
If Dermot Desmond agrees to do an interview, there has to be a reason and an angle for him.
Definitely.
So you're absolutely right. So he wants to put that across, and it does confirm what we all know anyway in relation to Brendan Rodgers, who was the highest ever earner at Celtic Park in relation to the football side of things, which doesn't surprise me either. He believes that Lenny has repaid. Yeah.
And it was worth it.
What was that advert? Because I'm worth it. What was that? Lenny has repaid his belief in him. I think 100% I would agree with that. I've been critical of Neil Lennon's selection against Ferencváros. Doesn't mean to say I'm anti-Lenny or any of that kind of stuff you read online. And he has repaid the belief that Celtic have shown in him. The comments about the Seville side, which I'm going to ask you about. Sir Alex Ferguson being a Celtic manager. Could you picture that? Aye, I could. And the long-term view, I think that was my disappointment. I didn't get much of what the long-term view is. We've spoken a lot over the last couple of months on the podcast, Kevin, about where does Celtic go next? 10 in a row, brilliant. Everybody's geared towards that. I'm focused on it 100%. But what happens after that? And we've spoken about transatlantic leagues and where Celtic are going to be playing their football in order to enhance the club, enhance the brand, enhance the business, all of these things. I didn't get much of that I know there was a wee bit of talk about a British League. Not sure how much you can read into that. So overall, what was your thoughts on some of the points I've raised there, particularly the Seville side, Sir Alex?
Right, I'll talk about the British League in the first. He's not going to come out and tell you what they're talking about behind the scenes. When the Atlantic League was muted, and you know what I'm working on at this precise moment, and Paul, so I've looked back at that time, 98 to 2000. Every week in the Celtic View, Alan MacDonald was in the Celtic View talking about an Atlantic League and moving to England. And it never happened. And when you go back over that period now, you look at some of the sound bites and they seem extremely foolish. And we're still having the same conversations 20 years down the line and nothing's moved. There's one of them that MacDonald says that he reckoned that Celtic wouldn't be playing in Scotland within 5 years. And he says that in 1999 on the issue of the Celtic View that John Barnes is presented as Celtic manager. So that's egg on your face at that point.
My mate Barnesy.
And Barnesy. So he's not going to tell you what discussions are happening or what the longer term future for the club is, because that's not for public knowledge. That's he can give you maybe.
I think it is for public knowledge. I think it is. If you're a PLC, I think it is for public knowledge. I think you need to share the dreams and aspirations of your club. Otherwise, you're just living season to season. And there is always that big argument about as long as we're ahead of Rangers, then certain people are happy. I'm not. And I think there's a big camp of Celtic fans who are not just happy with that domestic dominance. So I think it is something that needs to be out there.
It is, but should it be out there when we're going for the 10? Maybe that was the point I was trying to make. Should we come out with, right, when Rangers were going for the 10, okay? Walter Smith says he was leaving. Loudrop says he was leaving. They sold Gascoigne.
Did I?
They made it seem like an end of an era before it was an end of an era.
Before they got it.
Before they got it. Okay? So was that just hubris by them? Was that ego? Was that ego by them going, it doesn't matter, we can say this is going to end because it's going to have a golden end on. The rainbow's going that treasure chest is going to be there. We can maybe have a look at it and go, well, we won't say nothing, but if we get to where we want to be, we can then go, right, this is our plan for the future. There's no, we're maybe going back to predicting a rosy ending when it's not going to be, well, it might not be a rosy ending. So I'm maybe coming for the point is he's not going to tell you now when there's so much at stake. He's not going to tell us what's our plans. Like, me and you grew up in the 90s and you had the David Murray bomb blast. We're going to win the European Cup, we're going to do this, we're going to have a floating pitch, we're going to have a casino on the roof, we're going to have that. So with so much at stake this season, I can see why he hasn't says anything about what happens next. I agree with you with what happens next. 10 is a magic number, 11 is not a magic number. Regaining 1 is not a magic number. 10 is that magic number. And we could drop off a cliff whatever happens this season. Because we've won Scottish football or we've lost Scottish football.
Completed it.
We've completed it. It's done. Where do we go next?
I remember Kevin Miles sending me a text after I played at Celtic Park saying, that's you've completed it, you can retire.
So I can see why he hasn't came out and says what his future plans for the club are. Sir Alex Ferguson, I would have been extremely surprised if there's any credence, any worth in that tale. One, because where we were at the time in 1997, we were still playing catch up at that point, and it would have took a hell of a lot of investment for us to overturn it, even though we did overturn it.
I thought at the time, I'm sorry to butt in a wee bit.
No.
I thought the time was a bit strange, 97.
Dermot Desmond come into 98.
This is the thing I'm concerned about, but when I looked at that, I thought it didn't sit right with me, because even at that time, we were all about getting a manager in who was a non-British manager.
Aye. It doesn't sit right. There's something, doesn't it? The timeline.
The timeline's maybe wrong.
Doesn't sit right.
It would make more sense if it was when we got Martin O'Neill in.
Yes. It makes more sense at that point when Desmond was flexing his muscles.
Yeah, and there was a change.
There was a change in
approach there. Aye.
So the timeline for me just doesn't sit right with that one. Because when you look, with me bringing Martin O'Neill, he's the third best manager in Britain behind Wenger and Ferguson at that point.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. Out with those two, if you'd have asked any team in British football at that point, who do you want as your manager? Martin O'Neill was the top of nearly everybody's list, apart from Arsenal and Man United.
And when he came, I even thought again the natural progression would be that he would go back to a club like Man United eventually. That's what I felt would happen with his career path when he came to Celtic.
And it didn't, through circumstances and the fact that Alex Ferguson wanted to hang on.
Yeah.
Ferguson became a sort of chameleon who changed his backroom staff.
I like that.
He changed his backroom staff. He never changed what he done. He changed his backroom staff to go with the times. He
did. He continued to modernise. And if he couldn't, then he got the people who could. And that's a great talent in management as well, isn't it?
Well, a friend of the podcast he says that Alex Ferguson never took...
Have we got any?
Well, I hope we have. Greg, he says that Archie Knox told Alex Ferguson in 1987, you didn't take another training session. You're behind the times. You do what you're good at, which is managing. Let the guys who could come in. I mean, Archie Knox, for all we may dislike him as Celtic fans, when you talk to people in the game who worked under Archie Knox, says he was a fantastic coach.
Yeah.
Ahead of his time. So was Smith at Dundee United, and they had learned under Jim McClean. So Ferguson modernised his backroom staff. He didn't modernise himself. He learned to work with the younger players coming through. So, as we says, I don't think the timeline's right when he says 97.
Yeah.
That just doesn't ring true with me. And his question about the Seville team, of course the Seville team would beat the current Celtic side.
I think
there's no argument. It's not even a point. It's no.
The thing it made me think of is it's one of the things you can't prove either way. Everybody's going to have an opinion, etc. And not many people, I don't think, will agree with Dermot Desmond on that one. But remember the Rocky film where he's kind of retired and he's running restaurants and all that, and then there's a big TV show and it's about matching up people from different eras. It's like the proper Stato Championship manager thing, and it resulted in them fighting the guy. There must be a program somewhere. There must be a computer program somewhere where you could fire in all these stats. Everybody's banging on about stats, and pitch the two teams up and we'll see what happens. But I mean, how many of today's team, this has been an easier kind of question, how many of today's team would get into that Seville team? I'm
going to go back to that night with Rob Douglas at the Greenock Celtic Supporters Club when that question was asked. And he was honest enough to say the only person from the current team that would get in the Seville team was Fraser Foster. He did say that, yeah. He was completely honest about that. And now that Big Fraz is away, does that mean nobody gets in? Probably. Well, I think Fernandes was on the bench, was he not? Are we just talking about the night, or are we talking about the whole squad? We're just talking about the whole squad. Yep. I don't think any of them get in. And I actually agreed with Rob Douglas when he says that night. This is the only one that you could look at, because he was quite rightly to point out, he says, well, if you're bringing in Scott Brown, Lambert and Lennon, who are you taking out? You couldn't do that. It's comparing, it's a bit like the Lions as well, eh? Football's completely changed for the 60s and the 70s, and sometimes comparing these teams is completely futile because the game's moved on that much. It's completely different. You even look at the games over lockdown. The BBC started playing games for the early 80s, and you were watching Celtic against Dundee United in the semi-final of the Scottish Cup in 1981. And you were going, the game is now so much faster. And at that point, it was more individual. It was more, right, give Frank McGarvey the ball and hopefully he can turn David Neary inside out. and create some for Charlie Nicholas, or it would be the other way about. And you look at that back line, that Dundee United back line, Gough, Neri, Malpass, Hegarty, what a fantastic back line. They were just fantastically individual players. Whereas now, if they were playing now, they would be even better players because they had that individual ability, and now they would have the tactical coaching and the science and that behind it as well. So I sometimes get think it's completely futile and bemusing trying to compare teams for different eras.
It is difficult.
Changed.
I know, we need that Championship Manager programme to do it for us. We'll go back to some of the comments coming in, Kevin's, because I totally agree with you there, and it was you're right about Rab Douglas, so thanks for reminding us of that as well. Now, Connor Kelly is commenting on YouTube, and he says that Hayes was reliable if unspectacular, was a good wing back who was rarely injured. I think certainly he was reliable enough for Neil Lennon.
Is James McClean just a higher profile Johnny Hayes?
Well, we've had players that have played for Celtic in the past who were full-blooded, 100% players, Celtic-minded, as the term was and is, Celtic state of mind, to bring it up to common parlance. And I just think that I don't think he would improve the Celtic team. That's something we can speak about because it's in the here and now. We might not be able to compare the current team to the Seville team and thereafter, but I don't think McClean would improve what we already have.
He was Player of the Year at Stoke last year. He's a constant Republic Island international. The Championship in England is a grueling league and a harder league than the Scottish league. He seems to be a typical Neil Lennon type player, as in there doesn't seem to be too many frills about him. He's hard working, but for the money and the wages that we would have to pay for him, it just seems a bit rich for the player. And for what it would cost us, I think we could get another hard-working fullback. It would suit Neil Lennon for far cheaper than what we would get James McClean. And it could maybe just to be could be maybe to do with the profile of James McClean, that people are clamouring for him rather than having a look at what he would bring. And if he turns up, I hope he completely proves me wrong. I really do. You look at Duffy, but then I think Duffy's a different level from where Duffy's played more consistently at a higher level.
He was James far more of a fit as well, wasn't he?
Yes,
Duffy. That's what we wanted for the centre half position. We wanted the type of player that Shane Duffy is, and he's proven to be. I just think McClean, well, who's he going to be replacing?
It'll be Greg Taylor.
And if he's replacing Greg Taylor, then, is he going to be better? Is he going to be better than Greg Taylor? Now, people might come onto this and say 100% he is.
If folk want to say that, then that's fine. I haven't seen enough of James McClean to actually make a 100% comment on that. I'm having a look at where he's played, and he's played at a higher level than Greg Taylor. Last season, he was Player of the Year with a Stoke team that nearly got relegated for the Championship.
Yeah.
So was what he was up against level performance? Was it really that great? But if you've ever watched some of the Championship games, they're absolute slog fests, and they're poor games. So I'm wondering, I've watched them a couple of times for the Republic Island in the last couple of weeks when I done my Shane Duffy watch when he had signed for us. And I can't say McClean jumped out to me as being going. The boy Hendricks did. No Jimmy. Hendrick, signed for Newcastle. He stuck out like a sore thumb in that Republic Island side. But we've got guys from the Republic who watch the Republic more than me.
Yeah.
Will be able to actually tell. Ken Walsh, I'll make him Ken Walsh coming in because he watches the Republic.
Aye.
To come in and tell us, look,
are we not more?
The circus that would go around with James McClean would be hilarious. Maybe no for him, and maybe no for his family, but for us outsiders, the Perma Rage would be something else in the Scottish press. He'd become a target on his back.
I know he would.
Neil Lennon would be sitting there going, I'm no longer public enemy #1 in Scotland.
And by the way, that's a consideration in all seriousness.
That is, and I've said that kind of
No, but
flippantly
you're right.
there, eh? But I'm saying
Which is terrible that we even have to consider that, but that's the country in which we live, you know.
But we need to consider it.
But, you know, I would be far more interested in getting a left back rather than somebody like James McClean, because I think Taylor is fulfilling a position there that isn't his natural position at the moment if we're playing 5 in the midfield. And Mikey Johnson's coming back. We've utilised Ryan Christie out wide left, we've utilised El Yunusi, we've utilised Forrest. I'm more looking at someone, if we revert to a back 4, to cover Greg Taylor. And that's why I'd be more interested in some of the left backs that we've been interested. I just don't think that James McClean in that position is what we are looking for at the moment.
It seems like a name, and it lends me to go back to when Neil got the job permanently the first time, and that summer we were linked with Saul Campbell, we were linked with Jimmy Bullard,
David James.
It just seems to be in that ilk of a character who's been around the block, and you'd be able to trust him. Lennon would be able to trust him to put him into battle for Neil Lennon, and that's not a bad thing. But one of the WhatsApp groups that we're in, that both of us are in, Paul, actually says it didn't seem like there's been any scouting involved in James McClean, and it's kind of no difficult to see where that comes from. It's kind of hard not to. I'm reluctant to agree with that because I'm sure there has been some scouting, but it's also difficult to see how that opinion can be made, that it's an easy. Then we've had Damien Duff there. Duff's worked with the Republic Island squad as well. This could be a Duff legacy as well.
Well, interestingly enough, Connor Kelly, via YouTube, McClean would be coming into a position we already have cover for, El Yunusi, Johnson and Forrest, that push. That's my kind of thinking as well. And even Christie, because I know that some people say it is his best position out left, but he has certainly been utilised out left. I don't think that's where we need to strengthen. I think we need left back cover for Taylor, because again, is Taylor going to be one of these guys, Kevin, who ends up playing 50, 60 games this season? It
seems a leap to go for Aaron Hickey, the boy Doherty at Charlton, to James McClean.
Ben Davies, who they're maybe talking about a pre-contract for him.
It seems a bit of a leap. There doesn't seem to be much planning. It doesn't make much logic. If you're trying to join dots, it doesn't join dots. There's something, it seems to be, I'm not going there, I'm going round the circle there. I'm going to bring in James McClean. It just doesn't, the way that we work, it doesn't seem to sit right. But then, where the rumours came from has been quite a strong source. So you're going, well, wait a minute. I mean, they're claiming that talks have went on.
See, this is the thing, Kevin. There are good sources out there. I mean, we mentioned the Brendan Rodgers move to China, and I remember speaking about that when it was a rumour. You know, so people do get good information. There are good sources out there. And I think that's why we led with that as our headline today. But good point by Connor Kelly. And I think also Kevin Selt's coming in to say that the Seville team would bully these lot out the park, no doubt.
Definitely.
I think he's probably right. I mean, when I look at the Celtic side at the moment, who are our star men? I think our star men are Callum McGregor, Odsonne Edouard. I think there are 2 star men, I would suggest. Would they get into that starting lineup?
No.
And that's the thing. I mean, who are they going to dispossess? I mean, yeah, they might be part of the squad. I don't think they would be first picks.
And this is no slight to Callum McGregor whatsoever, but Paul Lambert, Neil Lennon and Stan Petrov would run across the top of him. They would. And that's no slight to Callum McGregor whatsoever.
No, I think it's a difficult one. We've looked at the reasons why it's a difficult one to, and everybody's going to have an opinion. I've not heard anybody agree with Dermot Desmond yet, though. That's my only thing. Gary Doonan coming back in via Facebook. McClean in his position has played a number of EPL games, 70 odd caps, more than players like Ayeti. You don't do that if you're a poor player.
I'm not saying he's a poor player, and when I was actually talking, I was thinking about he's been a mainstay in every team that he's been to. West Brom, Stoke. So Gary Doonan has got a point. And again, it's a football fan's point of view. He's a poor player. No, they can't be a poor player to get to that level.
No.
You can't be a poor player to get 70 caps via a number of managers at that level. So you've got to, maybe I'm undecided. Yes, I'm really undecided on this because he's played and done more than Greg Taylor. And if he was coming in, it would be to replace Greg Taylor. For me anyway, it would be, and he's done more than Greg Taylor at a higher level. But I don't see the dots getting joined up. Folk we've been linked with before, where we're going now.
See, what I always find interesting is there are certain players that if you ask the question, and that's all we're doing, ask the question, it just divides the Celtic support right down the middle. Paddy Roberts last week, you know, the suggestion was that he would maybe be a good addition to the Celtic squad in that he can play right and left. He's got that promise that's at the moment unfulfilled. There seems to be a good fit, although maybe not in his second spell. So you do get that debate. It's the same with James McClean. You've got people, like you say, who'd love to see him in a Celtic jersey, and others who, one of the comments here, James McClean again, no. So there's people who just don't want it to happen, Kevin, but I'm sure there'll still be a bit of business to be done over the next couple of weeks.
Definitely, and I'm talking about making sense. James McClean doesn't make sense for the positions that we need strengthened. Omar Colley makes sense. Bakker for PSG makes sense when you have a look at it. Doherty makes sense. Ben Davis makes sense. James McClean doesn't. And that's me not saying that he's a bad football player. That's not me saying that he wouldn't do a job for us. It's just having a look at where we are
and what we need.
It just doesn't make.
No.
It doesn't compute. It doesn't add up. That's where I'm sitting on it at the moment.
Now, Kevin, we've got some very important fixtures coming up, and obviously the next one's on Thursday night. So how do you see that one going? It's sometimes a difficult kind of game to call, isn't it, when you're playing a team at this stage in the Europa League? How do you think Celtic will line up, for example? I mean, we've rested Edouard. Does he come back in?
It's a one-off game, which means that you're already at squeaky bum time, because anything can happen on the night. You can get a man sent off early.
Come on, get the pessimism out your mind.
I know, but this is what it is. I mean, I reckon that we would have bet Feres Vanos over 2 legs. Maybe not comfortably, but we would have bet them over 2 legs. I really do believe that. And I really do believe that Dynamo Zagreb would have bet Feres Vanos over 2 legs as well. So this one-off knockout competitions suits some teams. Riga, Latvian. You've got to say that the Scottish League's better than the Latvian League. You've got to say that we've got infinite more resource than what this team has. But it's 90 minutes and we've got to be on it. How we line up, Barkas and goals. I like Barkas. I really do. I think he moves the ball far quicker to spring us on the counter-attack.
Yeah, yep.
I like that. I really do. I think he commands his box better, the 6-yard box better than what Foster does. He catches stuff. He'll come out when a ball's put into the box, he'll come out and grab it. And then when he's on the way down, he starts running at the edge of the box looking for that out ball.
He does, aye.
So I like that in him.
The ball he played up the wing there at the weekend as well. Brilliant.
I do like that in him. He's very mobile for a goalkeeper, and he seems to have an outfield player's vision of how to get attack started. I really do like that in him. I would stick with the back three. So you've got Duffy or El Hamed, because it depends if Julien's going to be fit. We don't know. Sitting here on this Monday afternoon, we don't know if Julien's going to be fit. So on the right hand side, you'll have Duffy or El Hamed if Julien's fit, or you'll have Julien and Duffy in the middle. And that's going to be really harsh on El Hamed, whatever happens, because he had a really good game. He linked up really well with Frimpong on Saturday. It was probably El Hamed's best game of the season. that he had. I was really impressed with his distribution, which was shocking against St Mirren on the previous game.
Surprisingly so, yeah.
So it would be really harsh on Elhamed, but you've got to say your three first choice centre halves are Duffy, Julian and Ayer. That's your three first choice. I would keep Frimpong in on the right hand side, and I'm doing this on the notion that we're going to have a lot of the ball. We're going to be playing a team which is going to play in the counter attack, which is going to sit in, like we face most weeks in the Scottish League. On the left hand side, I'm going to play Taylor because, again, this purely for the balance reasons. He gives us that balance. In the middle, you've got McGregor and Brown. Then you've got the big choice to make, Christie or Encham. Both of them played really well at the weekend, and whatever one drops out is going to be really harsh on them.
Yeah.
It definitely is. And up front, you've got Ayeti and Eddie. So
who you actually choosing then?
I would go with Christie. I feel Neil Lennon would go with Christie.
Right.
Because it's an away leg in Europe, and Christie has got a bit more legs. If we really need... Christie's better at dropping in if we really need to actually tighten it up at a time, I reckon. So that's why you will go with Christie.
Interesting.
But
Interesting
then again,
lineup.
he might play Christie in that dropping role with Eddie, because Christie played really well at the weekend in that sort of partnership role. There's a number of options.
There are, and I think Lenny will actually play with up. Personally, I think he'll play with one up front. And
flat back four.
Yeah, and I think Frimpong will drop out. Elhamed will play right back, and Duffy and Ayer in the middle, probably due to Julian's fitness.
We're doing it blind though. The coaching staff will have watched Riga and see how they're going to line up, the standard that they're at, eh? And I'm maybe just making my comment on what I reckon is our best team and my perception of Latvian football.
Yep.
So that's the way that the coaching staff will make a more informed decision based on what they've watched and the injuries of the players that we've got. Eh?
It'll be an interesting one. We'll be covering it here from A State of Mind, and a Celtic State of Mind will be covering every game this season, no matter how we manage to get the games, because obviously we've been buying them individually away from the season ticket over the last couple of weeks. So I think it's on Premier on Thursday night.
And fair play to Ross County and St Mirren for providing a decent service. For both games.
Yeah, I mean, the analysis, to be fair, we don't hear that. So I'm not sure if Danny Lennon was talking about military service and giving Bairns a belt like he did when we had him on the show.
Well, what I can kind of gather, a friend of the podcast, Stuart Muller, messaged me and he says, Tony Fitzpatrick is off his head. So I don't know what Tony Fitzpatrick was saying.
I seen Tony on the screen, but I'm not sure what he was saying.
So I don't know either, because the stream I was watching was a Celtic TV. But
right. One final point. We've had a message coming in via Facebook. Kevin, we shout out to Johnny MacLeod on his passing yesterday. Good Dunblane and Celtic man sorely missed. And you did open up by mentioning Johnny. What did he get called? Chippy? Chipsy. So if you can just give us a wee shout out before we end the show as well.
Yes, our good friend, member of the Paul McStay Celtic Supporters Club in St Ninians, Johnny MacLeod, most folk would have not known him as Chipsy, unfortunately passed away yesterday, and he'll be sorely missed by the members of the Paul McStay and also the Dunblane Celtic guys as well, because he used to cadge a lift back up the road, take a lift back up the road with us in midweek games, so we're thinking of his family and all the members of the Paul McStay today.
God bless.
Because it'll be a big loss.
Big loss, absolutely. Thanks to everybody who's been involved. It's been a busy wee bulletin today, and we're getting loads of comments via YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. We try and get through as many as possible, and any messages that come in afterwards, I do try and respond to them the following morning as well. So thanks to everybody for playing a part today, and all that's left for me to say is thank you, Kevin Graham, for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Thank you everybody.